Wow, the people at Laval University could really not correct anything correctly, it seems. Wow, I think if their lives depended on it, they would still fail at making a decent correction. Well, that's a segue for the subject. Hello everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Count County. Now, today we shall talk about the dominium, a really bad theory that I almost want to say is the conspiracy theorist level. Now, just to get some ideas, when I say dominium, what do you think in turn?
That's all like a fucking conspiracy theory, lad.
And you rock?
Dominium is a word for lordship in Latin.
Good. These are fair points, but first of all, let's do some introduction. Now, back in the day, but I think he's still out there working, Jérôme Bachet, whose book is a mandatory lecture in a certain class in Laval University, is teaching to students in Mexico why is medieval history important to the New World and why they should care. Now, this guy and his book is pushing the dominium theory forward, but going to back it. This guy had an apprentice. And yes, you can start your city joke there. That apprentice is known as Alain Guerreault. Alain Guerreault means co-worker, and also his wife is Anita Guerreault-Jalabert. They also have a daughter, but she does not matter to this. Oh, and they also have a fan, Didier Mehu, who teach in Laval University. Now for the theory itself, well, it is a theory that pretends that everything is merely relations of dominations and that everything is divided in oppositions of two. Now, you might think, isn't that overly simplistic? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. Now, to go back to the origin of the theory, well, they saw the words dominion and dominus in some old texts and made the linguistic fallacy of thinking that it means domination and not lord and lordship as it actually is. And they decided that he decided, Guerreault, that finally, the three orders of society, those who pray, those who work, and those who fight, were actually those who dominate and those who are dominated. And decided just to fuse together those who pray and those who fight. Of course, you can see plenty of reasons why it wouldn't work, but I need to go back to the later. And with this oppositions of two, they decided that everything was an opposition of two, that the world had no greater nuances, no greater vision, or no number 3 apparently, and that everything is in case of two, so not even Earth L, it's even versus Earth, or even versus L. It's this versus that. Civilization versus the savage world. Men versus women. It's always one thing versus the other things, and with usually the opposition, one being above. So as you can see, it takes away most of the nuances and most of the mindset of the time to make their own overly simplistic thing. And while discussing with Timeu, apparently, and also I think he said in class, apparently that when confronted by critics, they said that the critics of the others were not good because they did not have anything else to propose. But then when confronted with my own theory, he said that they would say it was dominus anyway. So I know it's not a perfect comparison, but you could put forward the image of the person that has been indoctrinated in some white political class where they think that there is only communism and capitalism, and because capitalism is bad, that communism is the only other answer, and that every time it didn't work, it was only because it wasn't real communism, and therefore we have to try again. This is the kind of mindset that they are in. Now, of course, it's not because someone does not have a better proposition that it is not that your proposition is not bad, and it is of course not every time something appears good, it is not necessarily part of your thing. In fact, many elements of the theory, even within that book, are self-contradictory, which is why I like to think of it as a conspiracy theory. But yeah, now as for the debunking of the theory itself, well, I said that they see everything in two, and you might think, what about the Holy Trinity? Well, that's the first part of why the theory does not work. The medieval world is basically an Indo-European civilization. The French, therefore before them the Germanic tribes, the Gauls, these are all Indo-Europeans. The Romans, Indo-European. The Greeks, Indo-Europeans. The Slavs, Indo-Europeans. The Norse, Indo-Europeans. And this kind of met its way in religion too. So you have the Holy Trinity, granted, got heaven, hell, earth, but yeah, on the side you also have purgatory and limbo eventually, but yeah, you get the idea that it's always a bit more complicated, but if there is one number that comes forward, it is the number 3. And sure, the 3 others, those who pray, those who work, and those who fight, is contested, but it still makes sense, and we have, even if they after the medieval period, traces of it. And especially when consider that Bachet tried to present the long medieval period, the long Middle Ages, well, how far is it to say that this was indeed there, and that may be something that did not think about needing to write, or that documents were not destroyed? There's a lot of vague areas that can be considered, but it's not because someone has lordship over someone that they dominate them. There's a lot of nuance, and as I mentioned, seeing the word in 3 versus seeing it in 2 makes more sense within the medieval context. Now, as for the opposition, well, taking back, or should I say, going back to the Holy Trinity, though any of the parts oppose each other, no, they work together. Similarly, using some things I've read from Saint Thomas d'Aquin, it's not necessarily men versus women, it's women were made from man, and then all of humanity comes from the original woman. So and it takes both to have offspring, and a family is the husband, the wife, and the offspring. So then it's everyone's working together. Similarly, the two others have mutual obligation, and they all work together to make things work. So it's the opposition do not work. Number 3 is everyone. Oh, and I forgot when I say number 3, but sometimes there are more things. I'm sorry, I should have said it earlier, but yeah, I spoke about the different planes of existence, but you know, it's not the civilized world versus the savage world. It's, you have the forest, you have the sea. Yes, they are away from civilization, and desert, they're away from civilization, but they're still very different for different reasons. And even the civilized world, you have the campaign with the peasants, you have the city with the artisans, and of course you have the monasteries, you have some holy places. So as you can see, there is a lot of different things. You could say that if there was a savage and a civilized world, that both would be in subdivisions, just like the 3 others could themselves be subdivided in 3. So those who pray would be the regular clergy, so the priests. Then you have the praying monks, and then the working monks. Those who would fight would include the lords, the men at arms, and other and lowly knights, such. And as a third option, the administrative help, so anyone who help them do their administrative jobs, including the women of the court. As for those who work, you have those who produce, those who transform, and the services. So you know the 3 level of economic: production, transformation, service. You know, farmers, peasants, barbers. So as you can see, 3 times 3, 9. It goes in these ways. And with everyone working together, well, it's not opposition either. And as for the domination, well, kings were more like referees with some moral authority, but in a way in a position of domination, and sometimes they were even weaker, and had not been for their position, they would just be a lesser lords. So at the very least, we can consider them as equal to the other high lords, but with a small piece of moral authority, because everyone needs a referee. But in a key game, the referee control the players and tell them how to play? No, they're just there to give punishments to the players who did something wrong as per the rules. So as you can see, not really definition there, and of course, if someone breach their contracts, because fealty is basically a contract, the whole feudal system is our contracts, and that is kind of my own contract theory, that it's more of a society of contract than one of domination. I talked before that peasants could negotiate with their lords, or did I in this take? But yeah, peasants could negotiate with their lords, and if 2 lords were competing for a village, peasants could choose whom they swore fealty to by negotiating the best things. After the plague, the king had to make laws because peasants had too much power. When a lord failed his obligations, peasants could see to a higher lord to get their rights, to get justice. And of course, peasants' revolts are basically due to Lord failing to uphold their end of the contract. And the Lord's kingdoms are pretty much between equals, even if so yeah, sure, a higher lord might be more powerful and have the filthy thing, but yeah, these are contracts, and these contracts have mutual obligations. So it's, I do this for you, but you have to do that for me. You're the king, I owe allegiance for you, but you have to protect me, you have to ensure justice. When I give you you have to take counsel from me, things like that. So it's a two-way thing, and that also fits with the theology, because ultimately New and Old Testaments are the two alliances of God with man. First with the laws and the Old Alliance, then with the Christ, the New Alliance. It's basically a contract between God and humanity. Of course, there's the theology bits of everyone being in debt to God because of the great sacrifice he made with the cross and so on, but yeah, you get the idea. It's a contract, and also being in debt does not mean that someone dominates you. Granted, God is a special case, but does not apply to lowly lords, since they at best are his lieutenants, and the Pope is his vicary. So yeah, this is the big counterpoint to the domination, and my own counter theory is that it's a society of contracts. And as a society of contracts, well, it's not domination, it's mutual obligations with people that can have a great varying level of bargaining power, which means that their idea do not work. You can dominate someone with the same power, they can accept some moral authority, but you have to enforce the legitimacy of said authority by doing your own part, and if not, they're going to rebel. So if we conclude, dominium is a theory based on a linguistic fallacy and defended with some logical fallacies. It's based on the idea that everything is a simplistic opposition between two, that 2 is the number that always come, and that everything are relations of domination, while in fact the number that comes most often is 3, and it's not the only number, for things are way more complex. And also, it was not domination, it was not domination, it was mutual obligations because of a society of contracts where the given word was very important. And of course, people worked together. Which goes with the mutual obligation, there were mutual relations between everyone, which were not necessarily oppositions. There could have been some oppositions. Sure, heaven opposes hell, but heaven does not necessarily oppose earth. Earth is just the middle ground. So there are a lot of more complex interactions, which is why that theory does not work. And on this, I bid you farewell, and until the next episode of the Count Counts Ye.